Welcome, Johanna. It's so lovely to have you here. And actually, you and I just started talking about audacious things in our respective lives, and I'm so honored and really humbled to have you here, given that you've got those sort of 25 million and hopefully 25 million more to come of your wonderful coloring book. That's again the new one coming next week. But I would love for you to, I mean, we were talking about introducing yourself with
hmm
something audacious about yourself for the audience.
Well, I guess it would be so the start of my career was quite, I guess you would say, audacious. So I graduated from art school, and the reason that I got into the whole colouring book thing was because in art school I was a typical art student and had no money. I was completely skint. So I was doing silk screen printing and textiles. And the reason I was even doing that, I'd gone to art school to do illustration, and when I got there, the illustration department was in the basement. I remember I got there and I was like, I cannot spend 3 years in a basement. This is really bad. So I'd wandered around the art school and stumbled upon the textile department, and they had this beautiful silkscreen printing studio, big studios that overlooked the River Tay in Dundee. I was like, this is gorgeous. I could have spent 3 years here. So that was how I ended up doing my degree, which is a terrible way to pick your specialisation, but it turned out fine. But for those of you that know how screen printing works, it's like stencils, and every layer is a different colour. And when you're screen printing, all those different layers add up cost wise. So each layer costs. So to keep my costs down, I just printed everything in black and white. And I couldn't use a digital printer because I didn't have a computer. So I thought, well, I'll just draw everything by hand. So unintentionally, the fact that I couldn't really afford much meant I drew everything by hand, and it was all black and white. And that was my final collection. And I graduated from art school. And even though I had done textiles, I mean, I was an illustrator. The thing that I loved wasn't printing cloth, it was drawing pictures. So I sort of set up shop in my, desk at the side of my one bedroom flat living room as a freelance illustrator. And I just went out on this mission to try and get as many big clients as I could, because I was like, well, it's a very cluttered industry. The way it stand out is to have a few big names. So for example, decided I wanted to get Starbucks as a client. I was like, I really want to do the Christmas cup. So I just started drawing on loads and loads of cups and leaving them in Starbucks and taking photos of them. And I started this campaign for the Christmas cup. And I put it on my website and on my social media platforms back then, which were nothing like it was today. And I said to everyone, I found the creative director's email address, I think on LinkedIn or something, or, on the internet. And I did this blog post. I was like, if you think I should design the Christmas cup for Starbucks, could you please email this guy and tell him? And then a few days later, I got this email from him, and he's like, why am I getting spammed with all these people that are telling me about your work? And we ended up having this email exchange, and I got asked to go down to the London headquarters, and I spoke to Starbucks, and I didn't get the cup, but I did all the interior illustrations and wallpapers and fabrics and wall decals for the St Vigo branch in London. So I got them as a client.
Wow, what an amazing story, actually. I mean, if that's not audacious, I don't know what is. Obviously, that's sort of, the perseverance, the persistence, the not really hearing the no, and the creativity. And I suppose it's finding creative solutions to,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I guess I thought that people like that would see a lot of work, and the way to stand out was to get your work noticed. I've just remembered, I mean, this was a long time ago, but I also boxed up loads of cups and started sending them to like Starbucks HQ, so they would open a box and there'd be a cup. And another one that I did was I really wanted to be commissioned by Creative Review, the magazine. So I got a copy of Creative Review and I made a new cover for it, and I stuck the cover down onto the old existing cover and mailed it back to them and went, last month's edition was great, but it could have looked even better if you maybe asked me to do the cover. And I'd done a blog post about it, and it was a similar kind of thing. Like, it was cheeky, and I wrote a little official thank you and sorry email to the guys that had done the cover that I'd covered over. I was like, I loved your cover, but I also wanted to do my own one. And do you know what? Those kind of things, they don't get you the thing that you say that you want. They get you the introduction so that you can then speak to the people and show them your work and get them to, just see your character and what kind of person you are. And I think it's fine to be a little bit cheeky, and then you get your in, and then you can like dazzle them with your work and your sparkling personality, and hopefully get the connection that leads to a commission.
That's fabulous. And you're right. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily that sort of cheekiness or, the audaciousness rather than just to soften it up, the audacity. It gets you. Sometimes it gives us a completely different path that we might not have seen or foreseen, but it's nevertheless the result of that moment of trying something different.
Yeah, I think it's that thing about making your own luck.
Yes.
Don't just wait for things to happen. And, it's not like X Factor where there's like this destined path and somebody's going to give you the thumbs up in the path and that's the way it's going to happen. You have to just kind of make your own luck a wee bit.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the definition of luck, this sort of intersection, I suppose, of opportunity and perseverance. And for you, how did you, I mean, I'm curious and I'm fascinated about how did you end up then doing your very first colouring book as such that became such a hit?
Yeah, well, it was very unexpected, is the first thing I would say. And there was no plan. So anyone who's a big planner, I'm afraid that wasn't the way it happened. But I sort of found my niche doing these really intricate hand-drawn, nature-inspired black and white illustrations. And for a long time, people said to me, agents and what have you need to diversify your portfolio. If you're going to be a commercial illustrator, you need to show that you can do typography and that you can do character design and that you can use colour. And I remember thinking I'm terrible at all of those things. Instead of being like mediocre at everything, I'm just going to try and be really good at very natural. So that every time somebody's like, we need a black and white floral illustration, they're like, oh, phone Johanna. Like, that was what I wanted. So I was busy doing that. And at the same time, I used to give away a lot of free content on my website at the time. Things like free downloads or free backgrounds, wallpaper backgrounds, for your desktop. And one of the people that downloaded one of them was an editor at a publishing house, and they contacted me and they're like, oh, we think your black and white illustrations would lend themselves really well to colouring books. Would you like to do a kids colouring book? And I remember saying, I would love to do a colouring book. Like, that sounds like such a fun idea, but I don't want to do one for kids. Like, I was imagining like really basic designs, like Barbie and a bunny driving a toy car. I want to do one that's as intricate and as beautiful as the commercial illustrations I'm doing for, the likes of champagne companies and hair care products and perfume bottles. Like, I want it to be beautiful and for people, adults, to colour it and for that to be like a creative practice. And they were like, wow, I don't think adults are going to colour. And I was like, well, we could maybe give it a go. So I drew up the first 5 pages and I sent it over, and there's a bit of humming and hawing. And I remember them saying, the sales department are concerned. Like, they don't know where this is going to go. Like, is it an adult book? Is it a child book? Is it, what is it? There's no section on Amazon. I remember thinking, well, let's just make one. And then we made the first book with very little expectations. So we printed 13,000 copies in the first print run of Secret Garden in 2013. And I remember phoning my mum and saying, look, I signed a contract and they paid in advance, and I have now spent that advance. So you have to buy as many copies of this book as you can. Because I thought, if you don't sell through, do they have the advance back? Because like that money's not going back. I was like, please tell all your friends to buy a lot of copies. But luckily it sold okay, and I didn't have to give the advance back.
Oh, that's fabulous. And actually, it's a couple of things that what you reminded me of, Johanna, is, of course, I mean, having the audacity to say, I'd love to do an adult colouring book, which is, I mean, it's a very pioneering idea, full stop. That hasn't yet been tested. So that's great to have that courage and take that risk. And the other thing, as you said, you reminded me of my own book when I was sort of pitching with the Audacity spectrum, and then Audacity didn't make it through as a title for one particular publisher. And then the other thing is that the towing and throwing that you're mentioning is like, where is this book going to be? Where can it fit? Because it's now made it into the leadership, but it's much more than that, because it's got a lot of my personal story, and it's got the personal, the practical, and also the professional. And even now, I don't think it's where it should be, or it could be on Amazon, but you have to find a place. And so there's a lot of parallels with yours at the time. Where would an adult colouring book even fit in?
Well, So I have to like put my hand up here and say I can remember when I was little there being colouring books that were aimed at not young children, but they were always quite geometric. Like I remember there being like tiny little tessellations and things. So there definitely always has been that kind of book, but I think maybe just not as not in the format that we
Mm-hmm.
made it with the beautiful
Mm-hmm.
cover and the gold foil and all that kind of stuff. And I think I read at one point, like build your own category. Like that is the most exciting place to be. Like if you see a bandwagon, it's too late to jump. And the exciting place is to be at the front. And it's always like that. Are you leading the charge of the great idea, or are you just bananas and on your own? Like it's really hard to know. And I don't know how you work that out.
You don't, you just do it by doing it. And I
Mhm.
always say that it's just like you experiment and you don't know, there was no guarantee it was going to work, but it's having that, again, courage. You and I were talking about my definition of audacity. It's having those three ingredients, the three pillars of courage, care, and nonconformity. So you need, well, you need them all, I would argue, but at least one for you to sort of, qualify. And yeah, there is no guarantee of success, but I mean, who would have known, as we were talking, that you go down this path, and then you end up here and there and everywhere. But I'm also incredibly intrigued to hear about your OBE.
Yeah, that was a big surprise. I feel like all the big moments in my career have been big surprises, which doesn't say much for my ability to like forward think. But so yeah, the OBE was a surprise, and I got the letter through the post to say that that I was going to be awarded it for creativity and entrepreneurship. And the creativity bit, like I kind of get that because I do like to draw, and I love the idea of inspiring others and giving people the ability to be creative themselves if they're a bit more tentative. But the entrepreneurship I always kind of struggle with because I do not think of myself as a business person at all, and I actually think I'm probably a big pain in the bum to a lot of business people because I don't like spreadsheets. I'm not a big planner. I don't think commercially. I mean, commercially, who's going to make a colouring book for adults? And, even at the height of the colouring books when everything was going really well and there was lots of licensing deals and exciting opportunities, I remember thinking, I just don't want to make bed linen and I don't want to, be spending my days going through all these contracts and having a legal business. I just want to draw pictures. So I am really bad for making what seems on the surface bad commercial decisions, but they're actually really good for my heart. And then I feel like that fuels me creatively to make better work. So yeah, creativity and entrepreneurship. The letter came through. I opened it and I thought it was a joke. So there was a telephone number on there to ask for further information. So I'd phoned it, and somebody picked up the phone in a very posh voice, said, "Hello, Buckingham Palace." And so I explained that I'd received this letter and was checking if it was a joke. And they were like, "No, it's not a joke." So I went down. I was very pregnant with my second daughter at that point. The Queen was busy, so it was Prince William. I got the OBE, and it was very, very surreal. And I remember just thinking, and then I had to. I think most people that get those kind of awards then go out to very fancy dinners and lunches, and I had to hop back on a plane and get back to Aberdeen because I didn't have a babysitter that night, and I had a 2-year-old at home. So I remember walking in the door, and she's got her little frozen Elsa dress on, and I just popped the OBE on her as well, and she looked really happy, and it was just like, this is a very surreal moment.
Oh, but that's such a fabulous story with the surreal. As I said, that the real life, as I call it, when that takes over, and it's just such an amazing moment to remember. But you've got so many to your belt. I mean, the Guinness Business World Record. What is that? I mean, that is even it's
Yeah.
fabulous, taking us all of these different directions.
Well, that was an idea. So I had a book called How to Draw Inky Wonderlands, and what I wanted to do, and what all my work is about now, is about giving people the courage, the audacity perhaps, to be creative. Because you know how like you never see a child holding a crayon racked with self-doubt going, I just can't draw. Like they're busy drawing on a wall. And I hate the fact, or it makes me sad, that as we get older, we lose that and we get inhibited and we actually can't draw. It's like everyone can draw. You just have to crack on. And a lot of people say to me, oh, the blank sheet of paper is really scary. It's like, I know it's scary for me too. And I've sold like all these books and I draw pictures for like proper people and big companies. So I thought the way to highlight that was to tackle the world's largest sheet of paper, blank paper. So it was 500 square meters. And we did it in the gym hall of my old secondary school. And it was actually loads of strips of paper that we just taped down onto the floor, but it was massive. And I had to, there was no time limit, but I couldn't get, again, I couldn't get a babysitter that night. So I had to do it in 12 hours. And I just drew and drew and drew. I didn't stop to eat. We had cameras set up. The official Guinness World Records guy came. It was very official with his blazer and his little satchel. And I was really concerned that I wasn't going to do it in time. And I covered it in flowers and butterflies. It just looked like a huge page out of one of my colouring books. And I got the Guinness World Record. I broke it. It has since been broken again, but I am willing to forgo that. Like, that's okay. I'm not going to go for it again. I was like, are you going to try again? It's like, no, I've experienced that. It was enough. But it was just a really nice challenge. And I think it highlighted that anything can be done. You just have to put pen to paper and make that first mark. And I think sometimes starting a thing is the scariest bit. And I remember standing looking at it just before, you know, like we started, before it was go time. I was like, this is absolutely stupid. Like, what have I done? We'd invited the press, you know, the TV cameras were there. I was sweating. I was like, God. But I think for me especially, being uncomfortable is where I do my best work. It's like, if I don't push myself, I very easily, you know, in a comfort zone. And yeah, I feel like I have to do scary things. Not all the time, because that would just be a life of turmoil, but the scary stuff definitely helps get the best out of me.
Oh, but actually, I mean, you just reminded me what I always say, that's where we learn, that's where we grow outside of comfort zone. So my book has got that very simple model that I use over and over and over again, which is even before I go into the chapters. So you've got the comfort zone, which is the first circle. And outside of that, you have another circle, which is what you're talking about, the stretch zone, the growing zone, the learning zone. So you have to feel uncomfortable in order to do your best work. You know, how did I even get into this? You know, such a stupid idea. We all have that when, you know, small, big, you name it. But there is another third circle that sometimes people don't appreciate, or many of them they don't know, and that is, so outside the learning zone, the discomfort zone, there is a panic zone.
Okay.
So, you know, sometimes we stretch ourselves so much that we freeze, you know, the sort of the flight, fight, or freeze. And I always use, you know, I think I shared with you very briefly that the story of the reason why my book is called The Audacity Spectrum is because my son was diagnosed to be on the spectrum, and he used to be in the panic zone many times. And that's where we don't learn. We stop learning at school, because if everything feels too overwhelming, actually our nervous system shuts down. So I always say, just be careful not to push yourself so much out of discomfort, then you end up in the panic zone and then you freeze.
That's a good point. I actually wonder, so my creative process, and my friends will all attest to this, is, you know, I have a thing, I'm very excited, I have a plan, then like I procrastinate and I don't want to get started, even though I know I have to do it and it's going to be good for me. And that's where my fear comes. So it's actually like just the little bit before you start the work, and I'm cleaning the studio, I'm sharpening every pencil I have ever owned, you know, and I'm organizing everything and I'm labeling like there's no tomorrow. Like, I love a label machine when there's stuff to be done. And my friends will say to me, do you have a deadline by any chance? Because we see you with that label machine in your hand. I'm like, yes, I do have a deadline. I'm very scared. I haven't done enough. And then I think I get spurred on, and that's when all the good stuff happens. But yeah, I can't make good work when I'm comfortable. I have to be a little bit, not panicking, but edgy. And then I go on.
Yeah, edgy for sure. And actually, it's interesting. You just, you know, admitted to it sometimes in some brains. And if I were to guess, you probably, because you've got such a creative brain, is you need to have a little bit of edginess to it. You need to have a deadline to it. Otherwise, we just keep overthinking and not really wanting to start. And I always say the first step is the first step is incredibly important. But really the most important one is the second step. It's like the babies, you know, they make the first one, but then they make the second. And before you know it, you see them walking. It's the same with adults. We just have to not give up, you know, after that first step.
That's a good point. I say to people all the time, like, when I look around at the people in my industry and other industries, or any field of life actually, that are what I would say is successful, like they're doing really well at it, I don't honestly always think that they are more talented or lucky or more intelligent or any of those things. usually it's just that they've kept going, because I think we all get these blips or things that go really badly. I've had so many times where I've made like a terrible mistake, and then you could just throw it all in and be like, well, that's just a sign, like I shouldn't be doing this. But you kind of just have to learn from it quickly and move on. And I think that's maybe why social media is a little bit misleading, because you're not telling everyone, like, I made an absolutely awful mistake this week and it's going to cost this much money. It's really annoyed this many people. The consequences are huge. Like, you're not going to announce that, but you'll announce the good stuff. So then everyone thinks that you don't have all those things going on, but they are. And you just have to, you just have to keep going. And I tell my kids all the time, like when they get setbacks, like, well, you just got to be gritty. Like, this is really good practice. You have to just dig in and keep going. Otherwise, giving up is the end.
So true. And actually, you reminded me, I'm going to embarrass myself in front of a live audience, because I listened to a podcast this morning, and that's, it's Steve Bartlett, but I can't remember. Okay, here we go. I've got it. Is the Guy Raz he interviewed.
Oh, yeah.
And your story so reminded me of that, because it's, I mean, I won't give it away, people can listen to that. It's a recent one. I think it's his, as of today, 14th of October is the penultimate one, but it's very much about that perseverance and how the most successful entrepreneurs, they start, and he was talking about, I think the Mormons, in the church. My daughter and I went to see the Book of Mormons, which was a very funny in London, I have to say, one of my most favorites. But they start with knocking on doors, and 99 of the times the door will be slammed in their face, and maybe one will be open. And so when you have 2 years of your life as a missionary doing that, you get so used with hearing the no's. And therefore you then persist. And then there's a great story of the Nintendo guy that brought it into US, that again, he had just courage to just wait for 6 hours to meet this person in Kyoto in Japan. Same as you, just, knocking on the doors and doing your little cups and that. It's just, it's very inspiring, just finding ways to try, experiment, and see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a gap in the market for some, I mean, maybe it exists, but like a book or a film about all the failures, like all the little projects that just massively sank. Just, it would be quite nice to see like what didn't work well for all these big successful people, and then what they learned from it, instead of always just seeing the good stuff.
Well, I think there are probably quite a few books with that, because I think most of the successful people will tell you that for every success, there are probably, I don't know how many, I don't know what the statistics will be, 10, 100 failures. And really is just, it's keep going. And every successful mission will have had many trials. For me, I don't even use the word failure in my language anymore, because I use the word feedback. And I think I've shared that on a different live. Is they both start with an F. So why use failure when you can say, well, it's just feedback. I need to tweak this here, and I need to tweak this here, and maybe I'll ask this other person. And actually, I'm just acknowledging we've got someone. So thank you for anybody who's watching us live, and obviously anybody who will watch us later. But Rob Richmond just made a comment, which is lovely. People will always be jealous of your success, but never jealous of how you got there.
Yeah. So in the beginning, actually, I think I mentioned to you earlier, I used to go down with my portfolio, and I live in Aberdeen. I would get the overnight megabus to London. So I had 2 part-time jobs. I was waitressing and I was working in a clothes shop. And then when I had a day off, I would take the overnight bus down to London, which is awful, by the way, like really bad. And then I would troll around all these creative director offices, show my work, wait for them. If they were in meetings, I'd wait in the hallway, but can I just show you this? Leave them something, like not a business card, but like a little book or something I'd made. Then get the overnight bus back from Victoria all the way to Aberdeen, to be back in Aberdeen or Dundee for my 9 a.m. shift. And it's like a lot of brushing teeth in Victoria bus station toilets, which is grim. And I just remember thinking, like, this has got to be worth, like, this has got to pay off. Like, we can't keep doing this. And it almost made me work harder because it was so rubbish. And I just think, if I'd been, flying BA, or, like if it had been an easy journey, I don't know if it would have felt so good if I'd have stuck it out. Like, almost the grittier it was, the harder I was to make it worthwhile.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is, the grit, we know that it's a big ingredient to success. Um, and now with my wisdom of today, there's also an easeful way to do things, and actually just trying, because I come from that mentality, or you have to work really hard, and the harder you work, but it's not always the answer. There are always creative ways, is how I now refer to it. There must be other creative ways, but of course that's been a phenomenal training ground, and therefore the appreciation is much, much bigger.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's you can do different things at different stages in your life. I now have 2 children. There's no way I'm going down to London to troll about with my portfolio. Like, you do different things that work for that stage of life. And what worked when you're in your 20s isn't necessarily going to work in your early 40s. And I'm very open to having different priorities now, and just making sure that the work still feels good and wholesome, my heart happy. Like, I feel like that is always the thing for me. Like, I don't want to be doing work just to. I'm very lucky, in fact, that I don't have to take on jobs that I don't want to do, or like go down paths that don't feel right. And yeah, I'm very lucky in that respect. It's nice.
So tell me and the audience about your new book that's coming out next week. That's very, very exciting.
It's called Magical Worlds. It's behind me.
Can you
With
show
a
it to
turquoise
us?
cover.
Actually,
Yeah,
I have it. I have your old ones, but I'm going to admit again to
this one here.
lovely.
So this was actually inspired by. I'll give you a quick flick. Well, this is what it looks like.
Beautiful.
I climb Munro's. So Munro is a mountain over. I should know the height. I don't know. I'm gonna have to write it down. But it's a mountain in Scotland. I think there's 180 something of them, and people bag them. You climb up them. And I started on this journey with my friend to try and bag all the Munros during lockdowns, actually, just when everything was lifting. And we were driving to one, and I happened to look up. And I'm a very nervous driver, so I focused on the road, and I glanced up and I saw a turret of a castle poking out between the trees on a little island on a loch in the middle of a forest. And I was like, oh, that's like the perfect little storybook world right there. And I was like, if I hadn't glanced up at that exact moment, I would have missed it. I was like, do you know what? I would love to create an entire book of those magical little worlds, like just little snapshots that could be hidden in plain sight in day-to-day life. And you could take, 5 minutes out of your day and just lose yourself somewhere more enchanting and whimsical, because being a grown-up is often very boring and tedious. I was like, I would just love if you could open a book and pick up a colouring pencil and be transported to somewhere a little bit more charming than having to do your tax return.
That's so beautiful. And actually, I mean, you made me really, I don't know what the word is, just almost wanting to do that, because I used to do it when the kids were little, just helping them. And we did actually have some of your books, I have to say, over the years when they were little. But we have a retreat in Transylvania, just overseeing the Dracula Castle in a couple of weeks' time. And part of me says, I hope that nobody that's coming is watching this or later, because you gave me the idea. Maybe we'll get that. The whole idea is to just calm, and it's called Return to Self. So it's a lot of that, really coming back to self and doing very little, no phones, so just doing this coloring for an hour. So I think would be bliss and enchanting. So watch the space. So where will it be? I mean, I'm just assuming they will be in the usual places, but
Yep, all the usual places, Amazon, all the big retailers, lots of independent bookshops too. And I'm going to do I do online book tours. I've always done these. I know a lot of people started doing them in lockdown, but I prefer an online book tour because my audience are all over the place, and it's really difficult for folk to get to one bookstore and then you only meet 100 or so people. So I should know the date. It's not next week or the week after. It's the week after that. During Halloween week, we are going to do 5 days of colouring. So each day you're going to visit a different world, a different page in the book, colour it in. There's going to be videos and downloads, tricks and tips, giveaways, all that kind of stuff. And I just love that it brings everyone together and everyone's colouring the same page. And the thing I love about colouring books is they're a collaboration. And when I draw the picture, it's never finished. And it's not until somebody's coloured in that picture that I see the final product. and it's never ever coloured in the same way twice. So for me, it's always really exciting when a book gets released just to see the images, like start to come to life and be completed, and see how everyone takes those drawings and makes them their own.
Beautiful. I love the idea of sort of collaboration, as you said, just, even that image. But where will the audience find your book tour, the virtual? Is it on your website?
On my website. If you go to my website, you can just click on the book tour link on the homepage and it'll take you there, and you'll see all the videos go live. You can get the free download. You can even start colouring it in beforehand if you're super eager, and lots of information about the book and also links for where to buy it.
Fabulous. That's amazing. And well, all I can say, it's been a real pleasure and delight to have you.
Thank you.
And then I can only wish for another 25 million to be sold in the next 12 months. How audacious would that be?
Well, we'll see.
Well, we can only wish. But thank you for being here, and good luck with it all. And keep coloring, black, white, all coloring. Thank you, Johanna.